Hi and welcome to Design Systems Community Chapter Dublin. Since we're fully remote, welcome to everyone around the world as well. I know we have a lot of people from around the world, Toronto, and from the US, and a large amount of people from Ireland. So we're delighted to have everyone here and welcome to you all. There's a lot of exciting things happening in the Irish tech sector at the moment. So we really want to try and create a community around that. And there's a lot of exciting things happening within the design systems, within those companies and within Ireland itself. We really want to try and build a community around that, a community that can help organize and share software development techniques, but also how we collaborate on design systems, how we build them, how we share them within our organizations, and just the general kind of community around that. So I'm going to jump straight into what our talk today is about. This is our first chapter meeting, and it's around collaboration systems. So this is about working together on design systems. This originally kicked off as an idea last November, and we've had a lot of work with the global community who have been fantastic in helping us get this set up and get this organized. So our first talk is about how we all work together. Before we begin, I'd like to have a big, huge thanks to the community organizers for their help, support and time. Enrico has given us a huge amount of his personal time, and Lucy and Varun have been, a massive support in just putting all this together. There's a lot going on within the community, and I'd encourage everyone to check out the community website. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of updates over the coming months and a lot of meetups from different parts of the world with interesting things around design systems. So lots to look forward to. This is a remote event, but we still have code of conduct. So, it's still, the usual rules still apply. Respect others, keep it legal. We have a Q&A at the end of this. So play nice, uphold code of conduct and the values, which I'll go into in a moment. And make sure you protect your privacy. It's one thing that we all like to keep. These are the values that inform the community and push us forward. So this is something that we all buy into and we all firmly believe in. You can see more information on the community website, but for today, we're going to focus on two of these mostly. So we're going to focus on collaborative working, and we're also going to focus on bridging content, design, and code. Obviously, the fun part of it is we hope that it's fun, and it's going to be a big part of the community as well. I mean, if it's not fun, why are we doing all this? The speakers today there's two talks going to happen. So the first is by myself, and it's around the theory, and then we're going to dive more deeply into the practicalities of setting up design systems and collaboration. You're more than welcome to follow us both, Design James Malone or Stuart_Giles on Twitter. The agenda for today is fairly straightforward. Communication between designers and developers, the infinite loop. So that's me. And the second talk then is breaking down silos, automation, workflows, tools, and humans. And that's by Stuart. We're going to have a combined questions and answers at the end of that, and that is going to be using Slido. So the whole lot will take approximately 1 hour. This event is going to be recorded and should be available on the Design Systems Community YouTube channel later as well. So firstly, quick question. Just as this is a new community, would really like to kind of gauge what everyone's interested in, where everyone's at in their own growth of having their own design system. So we have a quick question we'd like to ask. At what stage is your design system? If you go to the URL Slido, sli.do, and enter the code 77343, you can jump into that poll and you'll be able to see a few quick options and select which one of those is best suited to your stage. This will help us come up with better talks in the future, and so that when we're organizing talks that we will be able to tailor to what the community needs as well. So I'm going to give you a minute or so just to do that. We'll be able to see what is coming in. So I can see the results coming in now. Yeah, a lot happening here. So yeah, it's moving between starting and growing, and that seems to be an interesting one. That's what we would expect. So most people have their design systems, which would be a few months to, in rare situations, a few years old. Design systems is relatively new in the way it's exploded. But yeah, from what I'm reading, it's that starting stage that most people are interested in. We're going to leave that filter on there. And in the meantime, I'm going to have a quick word about our sponsor. The sponsor for today is NearForm. So NearForm creates high-performance software for enterprises. Working with clients all over the world means that they also have worked with some amazing design teams and design systems. They work with all types of enterprises, harnessing modern open source software to bring products and services to life. From product design to platform development, NearForm's experts can change how businesses operate and communicate with their customers for the better. Has a bit of a mouthful, but essentially, I have the privilege of working for NearForm. We develop software for enterprises around the world, and have some amazing clients that we work with, which gives us exposure to some amazing design systems and some amazing teams as well. The first talk today is myself. I've been working in design all my life and managing teams for large multinationals and smaller startups. All I've known is design, and I've been working in design since I was 16, messing around with early versions of Photoshop. So design ops and design systems is something that I'm very passionate about. Working with NearForm has given us the ability to look at a lot of different systems and how people approach design systems, their teams, and their workflows. So a lot of that context is informing these two talks as well. So let's jump straight in. Communication between designers and developers, the infinite loop. So this talk looks at why we need to bake collaboration into your design system. Not as an afterthought, but as the part of the process when you're planning it, and what you're going to do to make it work with various different teams. So setting the stage. So communication is key when it comes to setting up design systems, but it's the one thing that we often don't plan for. We agonize over the design principles, components. We talk about, the atomic structure of it, how we're going to document it. We look at software, and we look at all that good stuff. And I mean, that's incredibly important, but we rarely talk about how people are going to use it. So how are we going to work together? And another thing that we rarely do is ask people, how would you like to use our system? How can we feed into your system? So there is a myth, and the myth is that designers and developers collaborate effectively. Some people think they do, some people think they don't, and then there's the whole designers should code, and developers should learn this, that, and the other. Yeah, I mean, look, it's either a state of resignation that there's nothing wrong, or that there is some things wrong, but we don't do a huge amount to try and fix it. There's the other side where it's possibly essentially sensationalizing it, that this isn't as big a problem, and there's a lot of software solutions that are coming up that are attempting to address this as well. But the reality is that I've spent 20 years working in software development, and walls are real. Walls are often discussed in terms of bridging the gap, and walls may even be physical. So I've worked in many different office environments where development teams were in different buildings. They were in different locations in the same building, but they were always in a different area, grouped together. And we're now living through a strange time where we're all working from home. And this leads to very, very physical gap between us all. So design and development teams are often in different parts of a building, and they're often in different parts of the world. And it's not only development teams, but it's all teams, whether they be content teams or others. So the problem is communication. It's part of our human condition. So I've never worked in a team that didn't want to better communicate or more effectively communicate. Communication is the cornerstone of any good team or company, in my opinion. Sometimes communication fails or stumbles because of management. I've seen it stumble because of culture. Process is a massive one. It often can come down to personalities, different opinions, different ideas, and sometimes it simply can come down to language. So communication plays a major part in the problem that is the gap. If we imagine a scenario where you could tear down the wall, what would that look like? So how would you achieve it knowing that every organization is different and every organization faces unique and different challenges? If communication is the problem, how can we really bridge the gap? How can we really tear down the walls? And is that even the right approach to take? Contextually, boundaries are there for a reason. So boundaries, the hats we wear. Walls exist to set boundaries, to define what we do and how we do it. If we kind of take a step back and we look into other professions, like legal, for example, and they wear wigs. And this is to define their status. It's to define a role. And it's a visual indicator of difference as well. They even have a different language that they speak that makes it less approachable. And this is clearly differentiated from standard vernacular. So this is going deliberately to differentiate yourself. In a similar way, not deliberately, but unintentionally, designers and developers speak different languages, even marketing and sales. And we all have our own little bubbles and our own software solutions and our own ways of working that mean that we have boundaries. Using translation is one of those things that we frequently do, but we don't really apply it to software development. So even in development teams, different developers speak different languages. There are common things, however, in most languages. And you discover this if you just take the simple analogy of being on holidays, where you stumble around, you look for words, and you stretch yourself to speak other languages. As terrible as that may be, you manage to communicate. And the good thing there is that you have managed to communicate and the other party has understood you. It hasn't been in either of your languages, but you've managed to get clear communication. So similarly, there's ways that we can move outside our own comfort zones and we can move into each other's worlds as well to facilitate communication. Whether that be designers moving into Jira and GitHub more, equally applies to marketing and management teams, or developers moving into InVision more, or starting to use Figma API, or starting to just be a little bit more interested in each other's workflows. There's lots of ways that the translation doesn't necessarily have to be you need to code or you need to design. It can be simply that you have an interest, or you have an interest in the way the other party works. So I think we need to rethink the plan. If the plan is, to get people using your system, how can we make that work? So how can we make collaboration work? We need to fundamentally put collaboration ahead of anything else. A design system only works if people use it. I've been in countless situations where amazing teams have put together amazing design systems that are so well documented and so well itemized and listed and beautiful, but they don't get adoption. They don't get people using it. And statistically, the information is there to back up that most design systems either fail, transition, or become skeleton systems months or a year or 2 years after they set up. So if we accept that walls exist, then we can simply move on to building doors. Doors are a really effective way to get through walls. Doors help us get through the noise of culture. They help us get through language barriers, and they can often help us, overcome personalities or opinions. So it's not a single door, it's multiple doors. We often refer to this as systems design. So it's not a design system, but systems design. And a design system is one of those, but it's not necessarily the only one. So what are these metaphorical doors? So, okay, stay with me. This is the implementation part. So where am I going with all of this? Doors can be simply processes. They can be software solutions. They can be bespoke software solutions as well, or automations or ways of working. They come from a shared understanding of the objectives of each party. So what is someone looking to gain out of a design system? What is their interest in it? And how can you facilitate their workflows better? So you really do need mutual alignment where you are fulfilling a need and they are getting their needs met. So what do you need to design a door? This isn't about software. It's not about, more atoms, more things. This is about people. So you need people. You need a group of willing advocates, people who design systems, not necessarily design systems, but people who design systems. You need empathy and understanding. So getting outside of your own little comfort zone. We all live in our own little bubbles, our own little teams, and you need to have a team that is above that, so that can be outside of that to help that communication. And you need APIs. You need a lot of APIs. APIs are the thing that glue all of this together. So the design, how to design a good door. In simple terms, if you really take this to a basic level and you pick two teams, so when you're planning your design system, rather than go full on into making sure that everything looks beautiful and is fully documented and fully works, put collaboration at the heart of it. Pick two teams, whether it's a designer and two developers or a small development team. Pick a small project, an MVP project that you're going to be doing internally within your organization. Work on making their collaboration workflows successful. So don't assume you know what people need. Work together to make their systems work seamlessly. And by asking a lot of questions, you'll surface a lot of interesting ways that you thought were right, but end up being wrong about how collaboration actually occurs. So work together on making collaboration work between two small teams in a small project. Then you can start to scale it. You add a team, you can learn, adapt, and start to scale that model. So the system ends up looking like this. Doors are the cogs of the system. Once you've perfected your workflow between two teams, you can leverage what you've learned. So you can build more doors. These are more connections to other teams. They're more connections into other processes. They're more connections into other workflows. For example, a content team doing integration through Contentful, putting that through Storybook, and integrations with Figma. There's lots of clever ways that you can pull things together to aid collaboration. The complexity is always making sure that everything is interconnected so that it's a single line. Systems designed in isolation almost always fail. So again, it comes back to the stats that are there on design systems. The amount of design systems that fail are huge. And if you really want to get the pulse of your design system and how it's working, you really need to sit down and gauge its health by listening. If it's quiet, if there's no noise, you're in trouble. The sound of a healthy system is collaboration. It's contribution, it's dissent, it's arguments, it's people being passionate, it's emotion. These are all really, really good things. If you have people heavily engaged and energized by using a system, both positive and negative, because you can get a lot of people complaining that it doesn't fulfill their needs. That's good too. Whether this is through Slack or Jira or email, if there's a wave of communication, you're doing something right. So to make all of this work, you really do need the right mix. We are a diverse bunch, and I think the best thing to do is embrace that. Individuals, teams, and departments, in order to work together, you need a really good mix of people. And people using those systems. So whether this is a small working group, if you're a smaller organization, you can set up a working group that could potentially meet once a month to agree on ways of working together, to agree on ways of collaborating, to see where things could be improved, and to make those improvements either through software development or API integrations, or simply improving workflows. A lot of this can start off as a manual process that then ends up being automated. So start small and then scale it. If you're a larger organization, you can set up a joint group with design ops and DevOps, and this is the team that builds systems. So both of those are the people that build systems of systems. Having that scale will really help the management of your systems and how that they can work together in a more collaborative fashion. And yeah, the right mix of motivated individuals is really essential to long-term success. So yeah, this is the conclusion. This is where I pull it all together: the doors, walls, waves, and cogs. If you don't plan and bake collaboration into your design system, it will fail. Slowly and painfully, it becomes a skeleton system. So collaboration is how your system works with other systems. Your design system on its own isn't good enough. You need a system of systems. This doesn't happen on its own. It needs a team, and it needs to be managed. And as I just said, that team doesn't need to be massive. It doesn't need to be something that is continuously together, but having a team that manages system of systems will help grow and scale your design system. So plan for your system to be open and plan for it to work with other systems. Embrace the gap, connect the dots, and make the loop. So I hope that helps you in some way if you're planning a design system. And based on our Slido results, a lot of people are growing their system. So if you're growing your system, this is a great way to now take it to the next level. So if you have a design system, you have adoption, maybe you need agencies to use it, maybe you need your marketing team to use it, maybe you're doing content integration where your content team can see stuff happening in real time. These are all really good ways of you doing like an MVP to see how can we scale this? How can we make sure that the adoption is there and people continue to use our design system? If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm always happy to help. And we'll be doing a Q&A session at the end of this where we can hopefully answer a few questions. Now, without further ado, I'll move on to the next talk. So the next talk is Stuart, and Stuart is going to be talking about breaking down silos, automation, workflows, tools, and humans, which is a mouthful, but it's a really interesting talk. Stuart is a senior product designer at NearForm, and Stuart has 20 years career in web design. Stuart specializes in design systems and has been doing design systems for longer than they've been called design systems. I have the privilege to work with Stuart, and he is the rare breed of multilingual designer who is happy to code. So without further ado, over to you, Stuart.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see my slides all right. Thanks for having me, James. That was really nice to listen to. You're setting this talk up perfectly, so thank you very much. As James says, I've always existed in that sort of fuzzy middle ground between design and development. So my career, like this talk, is going to be focusing on that area. So while it's going to be a little bit technical, I appreciate a lot of the comments there were that we're general audiences at the beginning of these systems. So don't worry, I'm not going to get into any code. I'll try not to get too heavy. But there's a lot of practical things that I can offer, which lead on from exactly what James is talking about. So yeah, my healthy interest in what the engineers are getting up to, I think has paid off dividends over the years, where not only does it help me understand the medium that I'm designing for, I think the collaboration that it builds with the other teams, we can, with a bit of extra knowledge around the technical aspects, it's really created that shared language, and I have been able to stretch myself into their environments, and it's really aided the communication and also to build closer relationships with those people, as James says, that generally talk a different language, but it is worth stretching ourselves to get involved. And yeah, I totally agree that teams that communicate well together are the ones that achieve more. So drawing on these experiences, as James says, I'm going to talk about those silos, how we can work together better, and I've got some practical examples of tools and ways to make these things a little bit more efficient. So I'm going to kick off as well talking about when the design systems fail to scale. So it sounds a bit doom and gloom, but maybe failure is a strong word. Maybe really we should be focusing on the commonalities. No matter what scale, what size or scale, what point in your development the design system is, we all generally face similar kinds of challenges to do with communication. Most systems start off with the best intentions. Maybe it's a handful, or maybe it's an individual or a handful of designers who want to collaborate better and align on specifications. Maybe they want to reduce repetitive tasks or improve collaboration with other teams. Initially, it's going to start small, as it should. It's going to be basic documentation. Then as things grow and get a little bit more sophisticated, we might add our UI kits from Sketch or our CSS specifications. We might abstract our design tokens if we're really doing well. We might have sophisticated documentation about usage and how people contribute. But really, at this early stage, it's the strength of the communication between that small team that's holding the system together. So at a certain point, as things start to grow, it stops being a tool for designers, and it's more important that you think more externally, and it's more to do with the teams that are using that system. Now, these could be specialist teams that have got very special, unique requirements. Maybe they're platform-specific teams, maybe they're remote teams, and communication is a real challenge for these people. So each of the teams that need to be involved and need to work with the system will have their own unique ways of working and unique challenges. So how can our system work with all of them together? Well, eventually things start to get difficult. So the more people are involved, things get complicated. And that invariably means that our processes become a little bit stricter, and we kind of issues of governance start stepping in, and people have to behave in a certain way. And these things generally cause like we lose our flexibility, and people stop being able to be creative within the boundaries of these systems. Also, for the designers creating the system, we spend our time teaching and sharing and trying to encourage adoption. So we spend our time focused on those sorts of challenges rather than actually progressing the system itself. So our productivity starts to suffer. And also at a certain level, at a certain scale, it starts to become an issue for management, because they never asked for this system to be built in the first place. It's kind of grown organically through necessity. So now all of a sudden we need to start to think about how much this management is costing. So with all these pressures, it can end up becoming a blocker. It's common as well to meet some degree of resistance from the product teams consuming the system, because there's potentially a steep learning curve for them, and maybe the system's being imposed on them. Maybe that initially slows down their development, or they may feel it's stifling their innovation. So it's all too common for those teams to bypass, when pressures are high and deadlines need to be met, then the system can get bypassed and business as usual continues. So at this point, our system really has become a problem, and it's become the problem that it set out to resolve in the first place. Where if there's not enough investment or enough people focused on the development of this system, it just can't operate fast enough. And if those teams, the consuming teams, don't have the autonomy they need, then the integration of the whole thing breaks down. So at this point, the system no longer meets the requirements of the organization. It just doesn't meet everybody's requirements. So game over. Now, while all things should die eventually, that's natural. We shouldn't necessarily try to fight it. What generally happens is we end up building another one. So some shiny, fashionable bit of technology comes along, and new people with new enthusiasm pipe up, and they propose a better way, and this merry dance begins again, and we continue down pretty much the same path as we had previously. So before we go down that path, I'm just going to propose that we pause for a second and reflect on what we've achieved in the first system. What are the things that have worked particularly well? What are the things we need to carry over for future systems? And then what are the pitfalls that we've faced? What can we avoid bringing along with us? So in a very recent talk, Gina Ann has got an interesting quote here. She was talking about invisible systems, a very similar topic to we're talking about today. And her words were, the words design and system used in combination together literally just mean to systemize your design. We so commonly use the phrase design systems to refer to a thing or a set of artifacts that it's quite refreshing, and it's a little bit of a trigger light bulb moment for me to start thinking about how we systemize our designing. And so when faced with a new thought or a new problem, I always like to start with those things that I already know. So we already know our design system is going to need to scale at some point. That's kind of the point of it. So we need to plan for that growth and the change that is inevitable in the future. We need to plan for plan to accommodate the needs of an array of people, and we need to plan to integrate with other systems. On communication specifically, we know that no one piece of software is going to solve all our communication needs. I mean, we do have Jira, but apparently that's not suitable for all teams. So we also need to think about how our system is going to work with multiple systems. So we can't rely on one piece of technology to solve all the problems. So we need to think about that ecosystem of systems. Okay, so let's think about the people then. How do we work together? Forgive me, no design system talk would be complete without a quote from Brad Frost. So here's mine. Design systems are 80 to 90% people stuff, and 10 to 20% design and dev tools and those kinds of things. And I completely agree with this. It is a huge amount of human effort. And I do wonder, is it the tools that are causing that much effort? I think we've such a vast array of tools at our disposal, and many of them are very similar, and there's a huge overlap. Maybe they're creating unnecessary complication that's actually increasing the problems rather than reducing them. So I'm I'm wondering what we can do to reduce that effort. So if we have multiple teams all working together, ideally all contributing and extracting what they need from the design system in the middle, the single source of truth, then as James was alluding to, we need to think about the communication between those teams, and we can do that with integrated tools, open collaboration, encouraging a common language between all teams, and making sure that we have a shared understanding so all teams understand what we're all trying to achieve together. And it's really this loop of communication and the gaps between us. These are the links that bind us together. So if we pay a bit more attention to the links, as James said, these talks align perfectly. Well done, James. The cogs or the gears, they are the things that drive us. They accelerate our work. So really, we should all be responsible for greasing those gears and making sure that we keep things moving along. I've got a quite a nice passage here, which I'm going to read, so bear with me a moment. Design ops is a set of practices that works to automate and integrate the processes between software design and IT teams so that they can build, test, release software faster and more reliably. The term design ops was formed by combining the words design and operations. It signifies a cultural shift that bridges the gap between design and operations teams, which historically have functioned in silos. Now, this really resonates with me. Hopefully it does with you too. What's interesting though is that this is this was written by Atlassian. This is their definition of DevOps, and all I've done is swap the word dev for design, and the phrase still, the paragraph still make complete sense. So I imagine, or I feel personally, that the reason why these two words are interchangeable is because really they're talking about a mindset, a set of practices or a way of thinking that we can apply to any discipline. So why not apply it to design? And this backs up exactly what Gina was saying, that this is now thinking about the systemization of how we design. So yeah, I think it's a team sport and we should all be thinking about it. But really, when an organization does reach a certain scale, it does require dedicated people to focus on our ops. Okay, so let's think about the tools and what we can do to make, what technology can do to make these things more efficient. Right, so I've got a series of examples here, and I'll focus on the things that we've established previously. So we know that we need to build a system that is going to grow with us. And our design, as I'm sure you all know, it's a messy activity, and we create a lot of assets. Those things are difficult to share and difficult to find. The more people you include, you run into issues of ownership, like who's going to be responsible for certain things. And really, so with the subject of growth, I want to propose that we start off the new design system that we build, set things off on the best foot and start with patterns of good behavior early on, because they'll pay off in the long run. So I've got some examples here of version control tools, Abstract, Simply, and Cactus, just a few. There are others. And while these may feel intimidating initially, they certainly require a little bit of investment. There is a learning curve. I think you can use these tools in a very basic way to start your project off. And then as the design system grows and more people get involved, you can start to take advantage of some of the more advanced features, and it can grow with you. We need to build systems that are flexible. So we know everything is going to change and we can't necessarily anticipate the reasons why. So the best thing I can recommend is that you decouple your concerns. So create things in a modular way, which means you don't have any fixed dependencies on one thing or another, and you can change your mind and swap out a different technology or whatever at a later stage should you require it. And I'm imagining many of you will be aware already about separating your design tokens and hosting them in a service like Envision or Zeppelin. For those who don't know, the premise is by writing your styling specification and hosting it separately, it means you can have dedicated people that are responsible for those things, and then the tools allow the tokens or the variables effectively to be exposed for engineers to use in a variety of different formats. So we can specify the fonts or the colors or the spacing scale, for example, all nicely coupled up as a set of rules which other systems can then consume kind of independently. And then as and when other systems come and go, or if you have to maintain multiple systems at once, you only need to manage that core set of design tokens, which will then any changes will cascade to multiple systems. So this is an excellent idea to encourage flexibility. To take this a step further, these tools are excellent if you want to get up and running quickly. They're readily available right now, and it doesn't take a great deal of technical knowledge to get them working. But should you want to create a system that is a bit more bespoke, maybe you want to self-host these things, then I've just listed some tools: Style, Dictionary, Theme UI, and Theo by Salesforce. These are excellent projects that do a very similar thing. You can manage that token library and then expose the variables for any platform that might need to consume them. But the benefits are the flexibility. You can customize this and transform it or extend it to accommodate any need you may have in the future. So next, we need to build systems that integrate with other systems. And as James alluded to, when talking about designers and developers, we're definitely maintaining two libraries at the moment that the designers will manage their UI kit, and they might have a sketch library that cascades through other sketch files. But the maintenance of that library requires effort. And likewise, there'll be another library being maintained in CSS or JavaScript, maybe Storybook, that the developers are maintaining. And while DSM and Zeppelin, Zero Height, and these types of tools allow connections with Storybook, this is just really so that the components have a link directly to the comparable component. So your graphic button will connect to the coded button, so we can compare and contrast and start having discussions about the differences or similarities between these things. Excellent for keeping us aligned, but they're really bridging a gap. They're not reducing the gap or removing the gap entirely. So I don't feel that these are true integrations quite yet. A better example for me of an integration was a piece of work that Anton, that we work with, did recently, where he was able to connect Figma with the content CMS, content with a K. This is content.ai. That's a content management system. And by using the API, he was able to, for the first time that I've seen, pull in live content from the CMS directly into his design files. So all of a sudden, mind blown. The designer's not using lorem ipsum to compose a page. We're using real content that's been crafted by professional writers. And we're able to see straight away and understand more deeply the message that that the writers are trying to convey to the end users. Likewise, the flip side's true. The writer gets exposure to the challenge that the designer faces to do with layout challenges or maybe different screen sizes and things like that. So this, I believe, is a much tighter integration because the two tools are independent. We're both using tools that are, they're tools we're familiar with, and yet we're able to collaborate on the final outcome. We're working on the same thing together. Next, I've got we need systems that will facilitate communication and collaboration. So imagine a timeline of, and let's assume that we're using a version control system like Abstract, for example. It's not a stretch to imagine when that new brief comes in, or you've got a new job to complete, you create a new branch in Abstract. That could potentially trigger the creation of a channel in Slack, or maybe a new task in Jira. And as the designer works on that job, it's perceivable to imagine that when he makes commits, the commit message could be published to those channels. Maybe it could automatically invite people to join critique, and that could be, the benefits of those tools allows that anybody from any team to join in those discussions anywhere in the world. And then maybe automatically the thread of conversation that continues from that critique could then be published to the appropriate platforms as well. Then at the end, when the work is signed off, the work can be merged in those tools, which could trigger another chain of events automatically, which notify the appropriate parties. Maybe it could archive the channels. Maybe it could take a load. It could take a load of previews, screenshots, which then are attached to that Jira task, and it could automatically mark that task as done. So a considerable portion of this workflow could be automated, and it can be automated right now to a degree. Sketch and Figma, XD, InVision, these types of designers tools already offer integrations with the likes of Jira, Trello, and Slack, and those other collaboration tools. They generally offer a nice little clickable add-on for us to, or a tiny bit of configuration, but you don't need to be a developer to integrate these things. Many of them offer this stuff already. And then, like the other suggestions I've made, if you want to take the system a little bit further and maybe you didn't want to rely on third-party tools, you could leverage webhooks. So a lot of these tools, like Zeppelin, Abstract, Simply, for example, they offer a webhook which is like a push notification when something happens. So it's using maybe if this then that, or one of those types of tools. You could connect an action that's happened in one application could trigger another action to happen in another application. All of a sudden now we're talking about designing the automation of our communication. We need to build design systems that automatically validate our decisions. So I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of the Stark plugin in Sketch, which allows me to have a better understanding of color contrasts and font sizes, or color blindness simulations. So whenever I'm making a decision, I can quickly check this tool and it will give me some feedback as of whether I'm meeting WCAG requirements, for example. Which I find fascinating, and I'm always surprised by it as I'm working. But it is a very manual process. So as I make a change, I've got to go back to that menu and refire up the thing, and keep backwards and forwards to validate my decisions, which is baffling to me because I know full well that the developers have been using these kinds of tools and automation for years now, where before they commit any code, these automated tasks can be running and validating their decisions. They can be linting their code, or they could be highlighting accessibility considerations up front before they make any commits. So I don't think it's a giant leap for us to presume that these kinds of tools will be coming to our tools eventually, but I haven't found that they're quite there yet. I did find Airbnb have blogged recently about an experiment that they did where they've queried a Figma file using the API, and they were able to create like a designer feedback tool that sits alongside the designer's design files, and it reports immediately the color contrasts and things like that are being done. So there's steps in the right direction. And I also recently found out about a GraphQL project for Figma, which GraphQL is allows you to sort of access those design files in a more human readable way. It's a bit more accessible to interrogate those files. So I'm hoping that this greater and new accessibility to these tools makes it possible for more people to create tools to help us achieve these kinds of things. Next, I've got we need to build systems that automatically measure their own value. So coming back to the point I made earlier about management's concern about ROI, quite rightly, they need the evidence to justify further investment. So I'd recommend a few things. If you're starting out and you've low budgets, only a few people, then it'd be very quick to start a very quick survey that you could ask the people that are consuming your system the impact of how the system is impacting their work, and then periodically you could review the responses, and hopefully there'd be some evidence in there that would help put the case forward for further investment. Taking that a little step further, if you needed quantitative data to back up that argument, I've used a tool called Project Wallace in the past, which again creates a nice visual graph, so it's really easy to see. This tool compares and analyzes the CSS usage, or the output of the CSS that's generated from a system. So I was able to compare the design system CSS versus the output CSS from the product that's consuming that system. And it highlighted really visually that there was 16 shades of grey in the design system, but 154 shades of grey in the product that consumed it. So it was a lovely tool to highlight exactly how well or not the design system is being used. That's a little bit developer focused, but there are tools for designers as well. If you're using Figma, the enterprise plan offers a component library analytics tool, which again creates a lovely little graph to give you an indication of general systems health. It will show you which components or symbols are being used and which symbols are being detached most frequently. So that gives you a bit of a clue as to what areas of the system need a bit of investment. And to take this this idea of measuring value and automation to an extreme, I recently watched a talk by John Reedy, who talks about how they're using AI-powered design reviews at HSBC. They're using image recognition to identify component usage and inconsistencies throughout their various digital properties, which sounds extreme and is vastly impressive. But I can only imagine that when you're managing hundreds of designers, in a huge organization with people spread all over the world, an investment at this kind of scale is going to pay off. So finally, a bit of inspiration for everyone. I just want to finish up with some future tools, things that are coming. There's a growing number of tools which propose to remove the gap entirely. I've listed a few here. So I've got Interplay modules, BuilderX, Alva, and Merge by UXPin. There are others as well, but these are the ones that have particularly caught my eye. Whereas, as we said, the designers might be maintaining a component library that's independent from that of the developers. These tools allow the designers to use the developers' component library as the source of truth. So we no longer have to maintain our own. And not only that, they offer the ability for us to export code as well. So it could automatically be writing React, for example. Now, don't get me wrong. I hope these are not the future front page or Dreamweaver. I would never want to replace the work of a developer. But if they allow designers to have a richer understanding of the developer's conversation, and maybe the developer can work in these tools as well and contribute back, then maybe we are stepping towards a better integration between teams. I'd imagine that the conversations around like state, component states, or application logic and things like that, the things that are particularly difficult to do in our static tools, we have to hand over an asset and try and a developer will have to try and interpret it, whereas with these tools, hopefully it allows us to talk the same language. Now, full disclosure, I haven't used these tools in a production application, but and many of them are in beta still, so we can't. But I think from their number and also the excitement around them, I think it's evident that the future is coming. These are exciting times, and I think our industry could look very different within a few years. So that's me. Thank you very much. I've covered quite a lot of things there, so I'll create an archive of resources and share that with the meetup. And if anyone has any thoughts on this, then do let me know. And yeah, I'd like to continue this conversation further. So yeah, please reach out. Okay, so that's me. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Stuart. That was a really, really good talk. Really enjoyed it. So there's a few questions that have come in, which I will put to you, Stuart. So one of them was around, could you give 2 examples of how to use an API in a design system?
Oh my goodness, straight in the deep end.
Straight in the deep end, yeah.
Go speak to your devs.
I think you covered one with the content side. So the content is the most logical area to approach because, I mean, it benefits both parties there. So maybe just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it, that we can leverage these things. Most tools these days are exposing APIs so that we can have access to the inner workings of the tools. I think the content example that's probably my most inspiring one at the moment. Definitely there's loads of work going on in Figma. That's really interesting. We've seen some things with Sketch which have started to work. We saw some tools where guys are there's React to Sketch and Sketch back to out to React, HTML into Sketch. So people are starting to talk about how we get the details in and out of these systems, how we interpret these things, and I think it is coming. Definitely. Oh, I was going to say another one to do with like the design tokens, which is probably a common thing people are going to want to do. The DSMs and Zeppelins and things, these all have APIs as well, so we're able to pull code out or values out of a system in a way that you can then interpret and use in a way that's appropriate for your system. So it is possible already to interconnect these tools.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good APIs out there. I mean, Figma has a fairly rich API as well, where you can extract a lot of data from that. And there's been a lot of really interesting work happening in that space. So it's just a way to allow more collaboration, systems, again, talking to other systems through just a shared language of using an API.
Yep, absolutely.
I have another one here. So how does the governance happen with your company? Who is part of the decision-making process? I'll let you go there.
That's going to be very different for everybody. So there's going to be tiers of people that need to have sign off on these things. Also tiers of people that should be included in the review processes. So I'd be thinking, if at all possible, when we're automating that communication, to make sure that it's possible for us to include the right people at the right time. So if the conversation around review, for example, is exposed to the right person, then maybe that conversation thread is shared with the right person. Then you can get feedback or direction really quickly, and it doesn't have to go through like a review process within a design team, and then a review process with a product team, and then for a layer of product owners and stakeholders. Really, we should be able to bypass that linear loop backwards and forwards, up and down of communication, and instead invite all the right people in at the right time. And then in terms of making sure the things are appropriate, I think those validation tools could really help, where if we're making sure that certain things are done and conform appropriately to the standards that are set, then a lot of those conversations don't need to be had, because we know we don't need to go and get approval from any other team, because we know that our things already meet the standards that they require. I was just thinking about accessibility standards there. They could be set by the accessibility team, and then our designs could all be measured against those things automatically, rather than having to include them and asking permission.
I'm conscious of time, so we'll go with one more.
Okay.
With the tools landscape evolving so quickly, how does one decide which to invest in, e.g. InVision, DSM, Figma, future tools, enterprise context?
Yeah, really difficult.
Pick one.
Yeah. I think there is an enormous overlap in these tools. It feels like everybody's bringing out the same features as everybody else. So I feel your pain. And that's why I'm kind of interested in these future tools that are coming, because it's a little bit like they're disrupting our industry. They're not trying to compete with other people around. We're not trying to bring out the same system or a better version of the same systems. They're blazing their own path. So I'd pay attention to those. However, that it is a bit new, admittedly. So other than that, choosing the right tool, really, they all do very similar things. And if it's personal taste, then so be it. I wouldn't agonize too much. Really, it's the communication that we have together. It's kind of our workflows and our communication. They're tools in order to enable us doing things, rather than tools for tools' sake. So I wouldn't agonize too much. And also, most of these tools, if you were to invest in one initially just to get yourself up and running, then 9 times out of 10, it's relatively easy to back out of it and change your mind and get into something else at a later stage. So I personally don't feel that it's something we should agonize over. Better to get on and build your products, I say.
Brilliant. I think we'll continue. So there's a few other questions there, but we will answer those maybe on our Twitter channel. So if you want to follow us on our social handles, if you go to twitter.com, DSCC_dub, you can follow us there and we can get back to you. We'll also be sharing the slides and when the video is up and running, this video as well. So yeah, let's continue the conversation. If anybody wants to participate in future talks, we would love to have to grow the community and have interesting people discuss things. So feel free to reach out to me or Stuart on LinkedIn. And yeah, we really look forward to growing the community and getting some good insights from everybody.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds good, James. Thank you.
Thanks again for everyone joining, and hope you got something useful out of this.
Excellent.
Take care, folks.